So what is this section really getting at? It's all about whether you can use the native tooling inside Google Cloud to constantly check, demonstrate, and maintain your company's alignment with all kinds of different industry and regulatory standards.
All right, so the first big question you've got to ask yourself is, how do you know if you're compliant right now? Not last month, not last week, but at this very second. And for that, the first tool you have to know inside and out is Security Command Center.
Think of Security Command Center, we'll call it SEC, as your 24/7 automated compliance officer that never sleeps. It is constantly scanning absolutely everything in your environment, every VM, every storage bucket, you name it, and checking it against a whole set of established rules and best practices.
But here's the really cool part about SEC. It doesn't just find random problems. It actually maps those findings directly to the specific compliance frameworks you care about. So whether you're dealing with credit cards under PCI DSS or patient data under HIPAA, SEC tells you precisely which rule you're breaking and why. Okay, and this is where it all clicks. This is the real-world impact. Just imagine going from a painful, weeks-long audit prep process, I'm talking endless spreadsheets and manual checks, to generating a clean, structured report for your auditors in just a few hours. I mean, that is a total game changer. Okay, so we've got monitoring down. But now let's talk about what exactly we're responsible for. And this brings us to a super important concept, the shared responsibility model. Because in the cloud, you've got to know exactly where that line is drawn between Google's job and your job. This right here is a classic exam question, so pay attention. Let's take Google Kubernetes Engine. If you use GKE Standard, you're on the hook for managing the operating system on all your nodes, patching them, securing system pods, the whole shebang. But switch over to GKE Autopilot and boom, Google takes all of that off your plate. Your responsibility now starts with your application, its data, and who can access it. And this example just drives that point home. By picking a more managed service like Autopilot, this startup basically outsourced a massive piece of their compliance burden. This let their team focus on what really mattered for HIPAA, their own application security, without getting bogged down in infrastructure management.
All right, but for some industries, right, we're talking finance, government, healthcare, you need to go even deeper. You need an incredible level of transparency and control over what the cloud provider itself is doing. This is where we get into that trust but verify mindset big time. Think of assured workloads as a compliance easy button. Seriously, you can spin up a whole environment that comes pre-baked with all the guardrails for a specific regulation, like FedRAMP High. It just automatically enforces things like where your data can live and which support staff are allowed to help you. So, Access Transparency answers that one nagging question: did anyone from Google touch my stuff, and why? It gives you a clear audit log of actions taken by Google engineers, complete with a reason, like a support ticket number. You can see why that's absolutely critical for any auditor. Okay, but then access approval comes along and takes this to a whole new level. Instead of just logging what happened, it puts up a big stop sign. If a Google support engineer needs to peek at your config to fix an issue, they have to send a request and your team has to hit approve. You hold the keys. You get to say yes or no.
Okay, listen up, because this is a huge takeaway for the exam. You have to get this difference. Access transparency is passive logging. It's like looking in the rearview mirror to see what happened. Access approval is active control. It's grabbing the steering wheel to decide what happens next. That distinction is everything. All right, so we've looked at all these awesome tools, but here's the thing. The final piece of the puzzle, and what the PSE exam really wants to know, is can you put them all together? Can you build a real strategy that meets specific rules and regulations? So a massive part of this exam is going to be questions where you have to map a specific rule, like PCI DSS saying you need MFA, to the exact GCP services that get it done. So for that one, you'd combine cloud identity with IAP. Or for GDPR's right to be forgotten, knowing that the way to handle that is by yanking the customer managed encryption keys, or CMEK, which basically makes the data gibberish. Getting this mapping skill down is just not optional. And one last thing to remember. Compliance doesn't have to be this giant, heavy blanket you throw over everything. A smart strategy is all about scoping. You figure out which projects actually touch regulated data, you label them, and then you use tools like org policies and VPC service controls to wrap your tightest security only around that stuff.
And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. The real takeaway here isn't just a list of tools. It's about a mindset. Is compliance for you just a checklist you have to suffer through? Or is it a smart, automated strategy that actually makes you more secure? Because that mindset, that's what's going to help you ace this section of the exam. And more importantly, do the job right in the real world.